Chapter 3. Passengers. There must be a wrecked Mark III Imperial battle cruiser somewhere on this planet, Cal said. For a moment the twins were silent, the only noise Mia as she tapped fingers on one of her screens. 5, she said. 5 Mark IIIs in the wrecked areas. I'm loading their coords now. Make the ship ready to fly, Cal said. A gentle takeoff and then a relatively short thruster trip to the first point on Mia's list, the twins up close to the front viewport blocking Cal's view as Mia slowly circled over the area. There! Kyra yelled. By that big yellow cargo ship with the hole in its roof. Mia pointed the ship down at more of an angle to see, then followed the twins' pointing fingers. Lower and lower she hovered until the thruster down blast was swirling serious amounts of loose dust into the air and threatening to block all sight. More left, Kira called out. Cal heard Mia mutter, I'm driving this ship. Then he felt the ship judder and the thrusters winding down, while the twins were running to grab hands full of tools. We're only looking for one part, Cal said, seeing the pile of tools. You never know what treasure might be there, Kira said. A good engineer can never have too many spare parts, Kyra added, and the girls were racing for the main entrance, Cal having to run to try to keep up with them. You should bring a box for their treasures, Mia called out. She was right, so he backed up and found a spare box from the kitchen. Of course that meant he was last to get out the ship, but even so, the taste of dust was in his mouth as he looked to follow the women. Boots were leaving distinct prints, even the embossed size of each boot clearly visible in the light brown soil. There was never any rain on this planet, so there were no plants to cover and hold the soil, but the same lack of water acted to preserve the metal hulls from corrosion through the many centuries most of them had rested here. The women had disappeared behind a large wreck, but he easily followed their tracks, and when he did spot the Mark III hull, there was still no sign of his crew. Right up to the main entrance hatch when he heard excited yells from inside the hull, but he was more interested in the nameplate still attached to the hatch, the Sea Princess. For a moment, he wished his ship had that name. A female name was more appropriate for a spacecraft. No lights inside, but there was enough sunlight reflecting through the shiny metal walls to clearly illuminate the interior, and as he walked into the control room, he saw a room that could have almost been his. Apart from 2 of the chairs, everything seemed still in place, that is until you looked closer. Random gauges gone. Most screens' interiors removed, only the outer case left. Pilot's control missing and the console access doors all hanging open, pointing to much of the interior circuits being stripped. Through the corridor and the kitchen was a bare space, only some wires and pipes dangling down the wall. The bathroom, the same. The control room had specialist parts so there would be very few customers for them, while the rest of the ship had parts common to many ships. Even the bunks in the crew spaces had been taken. What was now a freight hold in his ship was even more crew space in this one. All those crew rooms empty now. Only faded pictures glued to the walls, and one poster instructing how to survive a depressurization event. Footsteps above his head had to be girls retrieving parts from the coils. When he got to the roof access ladder, it was Mia's body that was standing up on the rungs, her head poking through the hatch. Nothing he could do, so he chose to check the outside. This planet specialized in recycling spaceships. When a ship was sent for wrecking, it went first to one of the salvage crews where they removed any parts that might have a good resale price. When the ship had been stripped of anything of value, the remains were lifted and dumped far away on the planet where it was fair game for anyone to explore. Since there was little interest in Mark III parts, few people had investigated this ship since it was dumped here. Walking around, the landing gear was all in place as were the hatches. Of course the plasma thrusters were completely gone, a working motor of that power would be a real prize. As he walked, Cal was looking to see what had caused this ship to be wrecked. No signs of major meteor impact. No obvious battle damage. No crumpled hull from a crash. Was it only old age that had felled it? One ship sacrificed to keep another running. Was the Stallion alive because of this? Back inside, The women were all in the control room with Mia holding Kira up so she could undo the transponder from up the wall. The transponder was the ship's identity. Programmed and sealed and individual for only that ship. He was going to ask, but decided it better not to. "I'll take that full box and bring back an empty one," he said. "Maybe two," Kira turned back from her work to say. Nearly planet dark and still the girls removed treasures. "Time to stop for the day. We can do more tomorrow," he said. "Just this last bit," Kira pleaded. It was nearly completely dark before that bit was done, and the trip back to their ship was a slow affair. 2 boxes and 2 handfuls of parts made sure of that. Of course the girls were thrilled with their finds and wanted to sort everything right now. "I'll need to get you a special parts bin module," Cal said. "We'll try to find one on these wrecks," Kira said keenly. "That's much more fun," Kira added. Cal decided it was a good time for a shower and dinner, and he had done all that and still the twins were playing with the salvaged parts. Then with the outside hatches locked, he chose to lie down and rest. At least he needed his strength for the next day. Sometime later he was joined by the other 3, still chattering full bore, but he was so tired he let it pass, and it was definitely light outside when he fully woke again. "They've gone back," Mia said. "I waited for you." The girls were attacking the control consoles, and it seemed they were taking every part that wasn't firmly welded on. Cal's job was to take the pieces they held out and place them in one of the empty boxes he had bought. And then his terminal beeped and he answered the call, his agent's face on the small screen. "Urgent job I having," he said before any pleasantries. "Knowing you having fast ship I say you, and customer asks for girls too." That had the twins stopping their salvage quickly. 5 pods and 3 people. "Delivery to Carnival today." "I don't take people," Cal said when he got the chance to say. "I knowing, but they saying you who they wanting." "We have no proper seats." "They wanting fast trip, not seats." "Looking." Mr. Slee's face slipped off the screen and the inside of his office came into view with a man and 2 women standing. As the camera came to them, they all held up one hand. 4,000. No questions. Cargo issues. 3 days parking and tickets for your crew to enjoy the carnival, the man on the screen said. "We agree," the twins said in unison. Mia was nodding too, so Cal said, "We're an hour away." "Waiting they are. Pods on ramp ready. Job in terminal soon." "We've never been to a carnival," Kira said as the call closed. "It'll be so much fun," Kira added. "I'm not going on any of the rides," Mia said trying to keep the excitement from her voice. "I'll just watch you." Salvage quickly finished and a run for the ship for most, except Cal who was left with carrying the now partly full boxes. "All these parts out of the control room," he said as he struggled in, the others ready to fly the ship. He put his box down in an empty crew room, and then went back to bring more. "Coords loaded," Mia said while he was carrying another box of parts and the whine of the plasma drives igniting could be clearly heard. He said nothing until he'd taken the final box to the spare room and the door was firmly shut. Not until he was sitting in his own chair did he say, "Exterior hatches closed and locked. Ready to go." The ground was skimming by in seconds, the hum of the thrusters growing as Mia increased the speed and the twins called out gauge readings. The holomap showing a magnified view of the planet, their destination highlighted in the middle of a red ring, and soon everyone was looking out the viewport for a free landing pad near the freight handling area. This time it was the twins that were first to the freight deck to lower the ramp, and as soon as the ramp was down, they were both racing off toward the freight office to find their pods. Cal was still on the freight deck when Mia came to see. "They're keen," she said. "We'll have to sit the passengers on the bed." "They'll manage," Mia said. "They'll be too busy watching the trip to worry." "I've never been to a carnival," Cal said, looking out trying to see their passengers. "Seen the images but only went once. Was a strange mix of ancient entertainments and foods. I quite liked it, but never expected to go to another." "You want to go after the girls?" You've got the matching top. Chuckling, Mia sauntered down the ramp and Cal watched her back until he lost sight of her orange top. Alone now, he prepared the straps ready to tie the pods. 2 lashings for each pod, the straps arranged along the back wall of the hold ready for a quick loading. The job finished in time to see the first of a line of pods angling toward the ramp, the same man he'd seen on the terminal call guiding it. Toward this end, Cal pointed and watched the pod angle into the right place. Down now. The next pod was coming close, Kira pushing, and then setting it down close to the first. The remaining 3 quickly behind. Twins to help with the tying and Mia to guide our passengers to the control room. Maybe the tying would have gone quicker if Cal had taught the twins how he wanted the job done, but the instant the last lash was tight, the girls raced for the control room after their passengers. Cal was left alone to close the ramp and do one last check. When he did get to the control room, the passengers were all clustered around the holomap while the others competed to explain about the proposed route. Hatches closed and locked, he said loudly. Flight clearance good. Course to Arcturus 3 set, Mia said. Take off when ready. Now there was a rush to find places. At least Mia was in her couch, while the twins were torn between ushering their guest to the bed and getting to their own seats. The growing hum of the plasma thrusters winding up added to the urgency, and the ship was off the ground before everyone was in place. Turning to his passengers, Cal asked, "This a permanent carnival?" The man answered, "A moving event. 4 to 6 weeks at each place. Difficult to find sites big enough to hold everything, and locals usually don't like it. Trouble. Business going to outsiders." Cal nodded. The ship was slowly increasing speed, and the plasma drive was not as loud as the ether drive would be. "Sorry we haven't got better seating, but at least it won't be a long trip." "Nearly 2 weeks in a passenger bus," the man said. "The freight always seems to go faster." Cal noticed Kira looking over at him. Maybe she saw the potential too, but he'd keep it to himself for now. He still wasn't sure having passengers was a good idea. Up in a safe orbit, and before she engaged the ether drive, Mia asked the passengers if they were ready for the trip. All 3 nodded, but Cal saw their hands down and gripping the edge of the bed. Then she manipulated the holomap, her path marked in the zoomed-out map. If her route had have been straight, the path would have gone right through the center of the galaxy. Instead, she had planned a large curve to keep a good way past that source of problems. Now she engaged the coils and the noise in the control room increased. Cal was wishing the twins had changed that coil support before this. At least the part was in the spare room. "Shield 1 on full power," Kira called out. "Coil power at full," Kira said. Mia said nothing, her left hand on that side joystick moving, and the chart screen began turning blue while the zoomed-in holomap started twisting. "All power good," Kira called as the chart screen turned completely blue and the holomap was spinning and the din of the coils was intense. At least the passengers were quiet, and when Cal turned their way, they were still holding on tight and their faces had definitely turned to a paler shade. An hour in, and the passengers were like statues, and then Kira called out, dust reading increasing fast. Shield load peaking up to 90%. Even through the gravity control, Cal felt the sharp bend Mia had made in their course. Shield load down to 80. Coil power at 100%, Kira reported, her voice calm and measured. Looking at the holomap, Cal could see their position was well off the predicted path, but he trusted his pilot. "Dust reducing," Kira said. "Shield load at 50. To keep the nausea down, Cal only took brief glances at the holomap, but he saw enough to see they were past the halfway point, and were heading away from the galaxy center. Another hour and they would be there. At least Arcturus 3 wasn't brown. As the ship slipped out of ether drive, hues of green and blue and white were in the viewport in front of them. "It's so pretty," Kira said, and she ran to get close for a better look. "An orbit to check exact landing spot," Mia said, but that only encouraged Kira to run to the window too. Cal turned to his passengers and beckoned them to look. The sight was so captivating, the one orbit ended up as 2. I'm seeing the landing site in the dark area, Mia said. A large hollow sign visible to anyone in orbit announcing Carnival here in 10 hours and with red arrows running down to the ground. 24-hour Carnival, one of the women passengers said. Officially opens tomorrow at 9. Well, I better get landing clearance and get you set up quick, Mia said. Cal was more concerned with checking his terminal to sort payment, but the screen said it had already been paid. A check on his account and the credits had indeed been there. The 2,000 left, he transferred to Mia's terminal. Deal done. Getting a landing site was not easy, the designated area thick with craft. At least the delay gave Cal time to untie the lashings around the freight pods so when the craft had finally stopped, he could quickly lower the ramp and make ready. Soon joined by their passengers and the twins, there was a rush to select a pod and activate its lifter. Mia arrived before the last pod was moving. Do you want to go too? You've got the right uniform, Cal said. You sure I'm qualified to guide a pod? She laughed. You can supervise. Cal was last out, making sure the ramp was up and locked before he followed the line of freight pods. No guide rails here, only a recently smoothed bare dirt field, their destination marked by a ring of bright lights held up on a high metal pole, and in the distance the tinny screech of some kind of music. The hover field on the freight pods was set high enough so the pods still glided easily over the rough dirt, but those doing the pushing were needing to carefully poke to keep moving in the right direction. Mia was ahead with the twins, trying to help them both as they followed the passengers who had clearly moved freight over this type of ground many times before. The tinny music stopped long enough for a man's strong voice to say 9.5 hours until opening. Sprinting ahead, Cal caught up with the last pod and helped steady it. Let me do the steering, Kira said. We're best at keeping pods safe. Cal shook his head and kept on walking behind. Maybe after something else exciting they would forget about that video. Their walk seemed to take forever. Arriving so late had them landed a good distance from the Carnival site. That and the less than smooth ground. In the distance, Cal saw their passengers had arrived at the entrance gate of the fenced-off Carnival site. Kira had noticed too. Push quicker. We don't want to miss them. Cal didn't push quicker. You don't want to lose another pod, do you? No answer. Ahead, there was a queue, and all the 5 freight pods were together before it was their passengers' turn to pass through the gates. Papers offered and credits passed, and their passenger nodded everyone to follow. Through the gates it was brightly lighted chaos. People of all races and shapes talking and yelling as they walked and ran along the aisles. The sight a little like the interior of the Grand Bazaar, only this seemed even louder and more frenetic. Another long walk and they were stopped before a small square of bare ground. We'll be right now, the man passenger came to Cal to say, papers held out in his hand. Passes for all your crew. Thanks. I guess we'll see you in a few more hours. Your girls will really enjoy the show. You should come back and see us when we're set up. Cal knew getting the women away would be a Herculean undertaking. We need to get back to rest up for the long day at the carnival, he said. The fact they were still inside the action of the festival site had his words falling on deaf ears, the women all pointing and chattering about what was around. Even when they were back in the Stallion, the twins kept on with their chatter with Mia interjecting things she remembered from her one visit in the past. At least it was another 9 hours before the opening, so there had to be some rest time. Lying alone on the large bed, Cal thought on why he was so tired lately. Before he had the crew he'd been able to work all odd hours and it not bother him. Now he seemed to need constant regular rest. I haven't aged that much in a few days. Mia joined him on the bed after a time, and feeling her close made him feel more alive. Then he felt himself waken when 2 engineers squirmed their way between him and Mia. This was the best part of the day. The twins' hands were always out to touch and hold his skin. At least they were quiet and still, and he managed to reach an arm over them both with his hand holding Mia while he thought how much he enjoyed the idea of them all being his family. He woke with only Mia's back cuddled into him, and he realized he was kissing her head through her silver hair before he remembered he was not supposed to. "I didn't say to stop," a soft voice whispered, and so he kissed her again and squeezed her tummy a little closer to him. "Your engineers are dismantling this ship. You might want to go and check. I'd rather hold you. Plenty of time for that." He always felt energized when he had been cuddling Mia, so it was no effort to get up and inspect. The ship looked like it had been stripped for salvage. Console doors open everywhere. Panels on the floor open and even some up the walls, and multicolored wires and cables strung all over. And in the middle of that mess, two orange-topped engineers chattering together as they held up some great treasure. "What you fixing?" Cal asked as he stepped closer to the mess. "Adding another transponder," Kira said without stopping their work. But it's illegal to tamper with the transponder. I'll get grounded." "We're not tampering with your transponder," Kira said like she was speaking to a baby. "We know all about the laws." "We're only adding another one," Kira said cheerily. "There is no law about having a spare." Cal wasn't so sure about that. The transponder was the ship's official identification. All details about the ship, its name, class, build date, its size, and its designated use were all permanently locked in the transponder and sent out to anyone querying the ship. Added to that, all comms came through the transponder. It was the complete identity of the ship, and by law it had to be sealed. Breaking that seal was punished worse than killing a dozen people. No captain had broken a seal and remained a free man. "Why do we need a spare transponder?" Mia had come up quietly behind Cal. "Imagine we were going to a part of space where it was dangerous," Kira said. "Like pirates," Kira added keenly. "If we had a transponder that could be switched over, we could pretend to be a slow old freighter, or maybe a tiny one-man runabout, and fool them while we got away." "Sounds like we'd be the pirates," Mia said. "That would be the most fun," Kira said, Kira nodding by her side. "Until we get caught," Cal said firmly. "But if we switched transponders while we were in ether space, no one would know," Kira said. "We worked out that was the best way. We could get different pirate tops for when we do that," Kira said. "I'll design it," Kira said quickly. "Both together," Kira added, looking at her sister. Cal glanced over to see Mia slowly shaking her head. "I hope this ship will be ready to sail before we go to the carnival." "Tested and ready, Captain," Kira said smartly. "Your hero engineers will never fail you." "I'll go and have a last shower before the law comes to take me away," Cal said, shaking his head slowly as he walked away. "You better tell me what you've done so I can explain it to the judge," Cal said once he'd enjoyed a long slow shower and the control room looked like it was nearly back together again. "Kira added a secret switch in the main console to control the spare transponder," Kira said. Kira was busy tapping the screen with a large table visible on the main screen. Cal noticed spaces for name of ship and size and watched as Kira set the ship name to the Jolly Roger and the class to pirate gunship. "When we make the change button, those details will be sent out instead of the real ones and everyone will not know what we really are." "Are you sure we won't get caught?" Cal asked. "You're as bad as them," Mia said. "What sort of ship have I joined up with?" "A pirate ship," the twins said together. "A ship that might go to some rather dangerous places," Cal said carefully. "But still a ship that doesn't want to end up in jail." "Are you really planning on going to dangerous places?" Mia asked, looking at Cal carefully. "Maybe a little," Cal said, just as carefully. "There is always that job at the cryo prison, and I'm waiting for some off-terminal jobs that might have a small degree of risk." "We'll have to design our new tops quickly then," Kira said. "Getting ready for the carnival is our next task," Mia said firmly. "Risky jobs we can do without." 50,000 credits, Cal said softly. "Carnival," Mia said, but her tone wasn't as firm. The Stallion Book 1. Big Dreams but No Credits. A Space Adventure. By Mystic Alchemist. Copyright 2023-2024 Mystic Alchemist. All rights reserved. Written in Australian English. This book is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places and incidents are either a product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual people living or dead, events or locales is purely coincidental. Cover and text written and assembled by hand without use of artificial intelligence.